His Majesty stinks like a wild animal. That's how ambassadors described the King of France, Louis XIV, who reportedly bathed only 4 times in his entire life. If you were dropped onto an 18th century royal ball, you would pass out within 5 seconds. And no, not from the breathtaking beauty, but from the lethal combination of unwashed bodies, human waste right behind the curtains, and lice nesting inside the extravagant wigs. Today, we are breaking down what history textbooks keep quiet about, what people across different eras actually smelled like. From cavemen to gladiators whose sweat was sold for insane amounts of money, to medieval knights who smelled of garlic and campfires, but still considered themselves clean. Hold your breath, we are starting. Let's start with the caves. It is easy to think that prehistoric humans smelled worse than anyone, but historians actually argue otherwise. There was no sugar, processed chemistry, or crazy spices in their diet. A caveman's sweat smelled completely different, more like wet animal fur after the rain, heavily mixed with campfire smoke. For them, it was just the scent of one of their own. But as humanity moved to the hot sands of ancient Egypt, the battle against body odor truly began. The Egyptian sun was brutal, and to cope, people shaved off all their hair to prevent sweat and lice. But the wealthy elite had a bizarre way of staying fresh. At banquets, guests wore woven wigs, and on top of those wigs, they placed small cones made of scented animal fat or wax, mixed with myrrh and cinnamon. As the night went on and the party heated up, the fat would literally melt down their wigs, faces, and shoulders, covering them in a greasy, fragrant film. To the Egyptians, this melting fat was the height of luxury, but to us, they would look and smell like a melting, scented candle mixed with heavy human sweat. Ancient Rome, on the other hand, was utterly obsessed with cleanliness, but their method would look completely wild to us today. Romans had no soap. Instead, they would coat their entire bodies in olive oil mixed with herbs, sweat it out in a hot steam room, and then slaves would use curved iron tools called strigils to scrape that oil off, along with layers of dirt, sweat, and dead skin. A wealthy Roman essentially smelled like a salad. But the real kicker was the sweat of famous gladiators. After a fight, it was scraped off their skin, mixed with oils, and sold on the down low to wealthy Roman women. They used gladiator sweat as an expensive anti-aging face cream and an aphrodisiac. Moving on to the Middle Ages, the biggest myth here is that people never washed at all. They did, and quite a lot. Until the 14th century, public bathhouses were packed with people. A typical medieval craftsman smelled like leather, garlic, and firewood, since water was heated over open flames. But then came the Black Death, the plague. And medieval medicine made a fatal mistake. Doctors officially declared, "Hot water opens your pores." That is how the plague miasma flies straight into your body. Washing is literally deadly. Public baths were locked down tight. Water was replaced by fabric. People genuinely started to believe that a white linen undershirt possessed a magical property. It would draw all the dirt and toxins out of your pores on its own. An aristocrat could go 6 months without a wash, but if he changed his linen undershirt every day, he was considered clean. They smelled of stale body oils and dried lavender, which was kept in clothing trunks to ward off moths. And now we've reached the absolute peak of filth, the 17th and 18th centuries, the era of magnificent balls, Versailles, and hoop skirts. This was the dirtiest time in human history. In the massive Palace of Versailles, there were almost no toilets. Dukes, ladies, and the king himself relieved themselves right in the hallways, behind the curtains, or in the courtyard under the windows. Imagine that stench in the July heat. Louis XIV himself was terrified of water because washing triggered a severe skin condition. Plus, due to terrible dental issues, he had horrific bad breath. The king's perfumer literally had to stand by his bed at all times. The hair industry back then was a complete nightmare. Massive wigs were never washed. They were slathered with pig lard to hold their shape and dusted with flour. Mice would literally nest inside this mixture. To keep noble ladies from losing their minds from itching during balls, they carried special golden head-scratching pins to scratch themselves from the inside of the wig. This exact living hell is what gave birth to great French perfumery. Perfumes were not invented for beauty. They were heavy artillery designed to overpower the stench. The scents were incredibly harsh and animalistic, based on musk, ambergris, and civet, which are literally glandular secretions from animals. If you walked into a ball back then, you would be hit by a concentrated blast of unwashed flesh, rancid lard, human waste, and suffocatingly sweet musk. A modern person would throw up within a second. You might think that after the horror of Versailles, humanity immediately cleaned up its act, but the 19th century managed to create an entirely new level of stench, the industrial smell. Welcome to Victorian London in the summer of 1858. The city had grown massively, but it lacked a proper sewage system. For decades, millions of people dumped all their raw sewage directly into the River Thames, right in the heart of the city. In July 1858, a massive heat wave hit London, and the river literally began to boil with human waste. This event went down in history as the Great Stink. The smell was so thick and toxic that the British Parliament, located right on the riverbank, could not function. Politicians were throwing up at their desks. They tried soaking the building's curtains in chloride of lime to neutralize the odor, but it failed completely. Government officials actually had to flee the city, and the crisis forced them to spend millions to build the world's first massive, modern underground sewer system just to make London livable again. It wasn't until the late 19th century that scientists finally proved a basic fact. Dirt means bacteria, and bacteria means death. Cheap soap hit the market, and by the early 1900s, the first commercial deodorants were invented. But here is the catch. People didn't want to buy them. For centuries, smelling like a human was normal, and nobody thought body odor was a problem. So marketers had to play dirty. In the 1910s, a deodorant company launched one of the most aggressive ad campaigns in history. They didn't sell freshness. They sold fear and shame. They ran magazine ads targeted at women with headlines like, "Within the curve of a woman's arm, a frank discussion of a subject too delicate to talk about." The ads claimed that women were losing their husbands, destroying their social lives, and being secretly hated by their friends because of underarm odor, and that nobody would ever tell them to their face. The psychological manipulation worked flawlessly. Sales skyrocketed, and within a decade, corporate marketing successfully convinced the entire Western world that their natural human scent was a social crime. Today, we've gone to the opposite extreme. We completely wipe out any natural human scent, replacing it with the smell of artificial citrus or vanilla. So the next time you spray your perfume, just remember that behind that little bottle stand thousands of years of evolution, melting Egyptian head fat, gladiator sweat, the toxic vapors of the Victorian Thames, and corporate marketing campaigns designed to make you feel ashamed of being a human. In which era would you definitely not want to end up because of the smell? Let me know in the comments. Hit like and subscribe. Bye!